Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss my latest displeasure with the way in which the British media are conducting themselves regarding a certain level of hypocrisy over not only the latest coronavirus figures, but also reporting on the NHS. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as the number of corona victims in the UK has continued to increase, people have been drawing parallels with how the news has been reported compared with a couple of weeks ago when Italy was at the same point. And, you know, when Italy were where we are now on the curve, and the British tabloids in particular, but other sections of the media too, were describing the absolute disaster of the situation. People were in lockdown. Italian medics had PPE, but their healthcare systems were being stretched, and this was all a disaster. The number of deaths had increased by 900 in one day, something that's happened in the UK a couple of days ago. In Britain, this was being reported in quite apocalyptic terms. Roll on 2 weeks, and with the same numbers in the UK, but where medics do not have the equipment they need, and our healthcare system was stretched before these cases started emerging, and where the lockdown measures have been put in place further along the curve and were less severe. And are the British media reporting in the same terms, given the same objective set of facts? In fact, rather worse ones, you would argue. Are they reporting it in similar terms? In a word, no. In fact, to look through the headlines, at the point at which I'm doing this, which is going to be day out of date, I'm afraid, in terms of when you're seeing this, it was almost jolly. It was like silver linings all over the headlines. Some sections of the media actually being quite cheerful, you know, presenting the news instead of actually drawing attention to the human tragedy that is unfolding in this country. But actually it's good news because the Prime Minister's on the mend. Now, that is good news. I'm not disputing that. We're all pleased about that. Many of us are pleased about that. But hundreds of people are dying every single day, which also means thousands of people are worsening. They're still alive, but their condition is worsening every single day because of that man's failure to act in the national interest. And should we be sympathetic to his plight? Sure, I am. But he massively increased his chances of contracting this virus by not following the distancing rules himself. The ministers keep insisting that they've done their best to carry out social distancing. No, they did not. No, they did not. They have been filmed in close contact with each other. Although when they're doing their press conferences, which shouldn't be done like that at all, they should be done remotely as well. Journalists aren't there. They're in there remotely. Why are the spokespeople at the press conference not as well? But it looks like they're distancing a little bit. You've got 3 podia there, all that look like they might be about 2 metres apart. But, you know, I haven't seen footage recently, but when you've seen them coming in the past, they all come in together, not one at a time. And you know, just the number of photos, even recent photos of ministers in crowds of people that they do not live with. You know, so, and this is the sort of behaviour that massively increased his risk of contracting it. To say nothing of boasting of shaking hands with corona patients, which I don't believe, by the way. I don't believe he would have even been allowed to have done that. But to, you know. And also his actions would almost certainly mean that he's passed that infection on to others as well. So he's not only potentially, we don't know for certain, but potentially put himself in the situation he's in, but he's potentially put others with his own selfishness. So why is the recovery of one man, albeit an important one? I'm not saying, oh, you know, you should do a similar level of reporting on every single other corona patient. No, of course not. He's a much more important one in the current crisis, whether you feel he's the right person for that job or not, and I certainly don't. He is important. He's the Prime Minister. That makes him more newsworthy than any individual. But why does it make him more newsworthy than the thousands of individuals and you know, the nearly 1,000 new grieving families in a single day? In fact, when it comes to reporting bad news, which our newspapers absolutely love to do, and when there isn't enough of it, or it doesn't seem bad enough, they either embellish it or just straight up make it up half the time. What most of the media actually seem upset about, because there's got to be some angst in there, it can't all be good news, is that the lockdown, we don't know when it's ending. That's what they're most annoyed about. The government aren't telling us when the lockdown's ending. No, that's because they don't know. We're being told to brace ourselves for weeks more lockdown. And the papers in particular are whining as if it's unexpected. As if they thought the 3-week initial lockdown would be it. That'd be it. Oh, lockdown for 3 weeks. Oh, it's really annoying, but we'll get through it. And at the end of the 3 weeks, they're thinking, hang on a minute, it's going to carry on for longer? Have they not looked around at other countries? And I do get the way that, I understand an argument that the way you would present a particular piece of news that's happening abroad, you would report it differently than if it's happening internally. You can report a situation in Italy and you can lay it on good and thick, whereas if you did the same thing in the UK, you might create panic. Obviously, you don't want to create panic. But the day after the UK first hit 900 deaths in a single day, there wasn't really a single newspaper making it the focus of its headlines. It was mentioned here and there, but it was never the focus. The expectation of a continued lockdown was the most prominent feature of the headlines. More NHS frontline medics have also died, having not been given the correct PPE. A load of other medics were talking about recently, I was talking about recently, how some nurses had to use bin bags because they weren't getting the PPE they needed. A load of those have tested positive now because, bin bags don't really do the job. Not a word in the headlines of the mainstream media. Not a word about it in the actual headlines. I mean, if I was to buy all these papers and have to bury my head in, maybe there'll be some mention somewhere. It needs to be front and centre. A bus driver, the latest bus driver to die of the virus after having been forced to go to work. One of over a dozen now in London. Not a word in the headlines. At least not nationally. Maybe there would be in some local London papers. And the Sun newspaper, the Sun, one of the absolute worst papers we have, was actually making a lot of people sick with what they were doing. Its headlines were praising the NHS. Fair enough, not criticising that. But claiming to be on their side. Not by organising a campaign to get them the equipment they need or shining a spotlight on the problems that NHS staff are facing, which is totally unnecessary. We get that they're going to be under extra pressure at the moment, and that's no fault of anyone's. Even if you accept that a lot of that pressure is caused by 10 years of underfunding, well, there's no point in moaning about that now. I mean, I'm going to anyway, but that's for an inquiry in the future. But in the here and now, they're still being failed, deliberately failed. It's not even like they're being helped to the best of the government's ability right now. Are they shining a spotlight on that? No. Just plugging the third week's round of applause for them. And as others have pointed out, this is particularly galling from the Sun. From any newspaper, I would roll my eyes. From the Sun, this is the same newspaper that was calling a couple of years ago for junior doctors to be sacked for having the nerve to strike for the poor conditions they were facing, and supported the party that has undermined the NHS for a decade and attacked the party that wanted it properly funded. In fact, you can see here someone was pointing out that just a couple of years ago they were trying to say that we shouldn't be lavishing too much praise on the NHS. Stop putting it on a pedestal. Now they're describing NHS workers as angels. Absolutely makes me sick. But the papers in general, I mean, that's just one of the worst ones. The papers in general don't really seem to be batting for the NHS at all. Sure, they're putting photos on the NHS marvellous, don't we appreciate them? Well, why aren't you doing anything to help them? If they want to show their appreciation, why don't you report on the lack of PPE that's being given on a daily basis? Report that some of the PPE being provided is years out of date. Report that NHS staff have been threatened with disciplinary action for raising these issues. Report that NHS frontline staff, nurses and doctors, are being evicted from their homes during this crisis. Report that. because what we know is that when they do report things that shouldn't be happening, the government acts. We've seen over the last couple of months when the newspapers get the bone in their teeth and really go for something, the government feels compelled to act. So report these things. Or don't pretend you care. That's my view on it anyway. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.